Here is the hole in the back of what I'm wearing, by the way. Right there. I think there's another one over there. Do you see that? That's why I don't normally wear this one out. Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Bethany. I'm the girl behind Well Loved Knits. And in this video, I really want to talk through some of my knitting resolutions for 2022. This part of the year is one of my favorites because there is that newness. The transition from an old year to a new year, while it's extremely shocking, I can't believe we're here. 2022 came out of nowhere, it seems, but I'm still trying to embrace it because historically for me, the new year is always very exciting. I love that new chapter, that clean slate. I love setting goals for myself. Whether I meet them or not is one thing, but it's a lot of fun to set those intentions and see how you do at the end of the year. I'm one of those people that really enjoy setting new goals, New Year's resolutions for myself at the beginning of the year. Not just knitting related, but you know, it could be just about anything to get new hobbies. I think that's even how I started knitting in the first place. I think one of my New Year's resolutions was to find a new hobby. So these things, it's just really fun to set those intentions and see where you land and set some challenges for yourself. Even if you can't really attain them, it's still fun to challenge yourself to be a little bit better than the year before. So that's kind of what it's all about, but these are definitely very knitting specific. Because I want to improve on my knitting in 2022, I want to focus on certain areas of knitting, want to set goals, hopefully achieve them. We're going to have a little bit of a chat, so grab some tea, some coffee, maybe grab a notebook if you want to start doing your knitting resolutions too. And let's get into the video. So 2022 is going to be the year of intentional knitting for me, so a lot of my resolutions kind of tie into that. The first one being knitting my stash and being more conscious and intentional about what I welcome into my stash as well. So this relates to our conversation from a couple of videos ago about knitting sustainably, something that I want to definitely improve upon. I've been trying to knit things that I absolutely love and that I want to put into my closet and get a lot of wear out of. That doesn't always happen, but this year I'm going to get even a little bit better, hopefully, with these intentions that I'm setting. So for me, I would really love to knit 80% of the stash that I currently have. I have done a bit of a destash, so I don't think this is gonna be impossible. I have a good mix of yarn that's not just chunky yarn, it's also a lot of thinner yarns that I haven't really sunk into yet. I wouldn't say that I went overboard on purchasing in 2021, so this isn't going to be the antithesis to that. And I'm not trying to starve myself of whatever yarn that I might have use for a project, but I'm definitely going to knit my stash first. And if there's really no way that I can work with the yarn that I currently have, I will allow myself to purchase, but with a project in mind. I really set this intention because I wanted to take away the learnings that I had from last year that I've mentioned to you guys about fiber and color. Like the fiber content and the color of yarn, I might like the look of it, but that doesn't translate 100% to the final piece that I like to knit up and wear. In 2022, while I'm not doing a no-buy year, I am definitely doing a no-buying yarn just because I think it's pretty. That is not going to fly for me this year. I really want to carefully consider my past experience, especially last year, it being a mixed bag, specifically because of the colors that I decided or the fibers that I chose to use for certain projects. Those things I'm really going to consider up front and really double, triple question myself if that's something that I will love the final piece of. And learning those things about mixing color with a very out there fiber. I'm thinking specifically with mohair. If it's a very colorful mohair, that might make it a little more difficult for me to get the wear out of it that I would want. And since I want to be more intentional about the projects that I do, I definitely don't want to waste a lot of time by using the wrong types of fiber and color. So really I want to work with the yarn that I have. Then if I welcome new yarn to my stash, I also want it to be something that I don't just love as a skein. I want to be able to work on it because I've also had experience where I love the skein so much that makes me almost nervous to work with the yarn, and I don't want that either. I don't want it to sit in my stash just because I love it so much and that it's so pretty. We're going to be knitting our stash this year. But this resolution also includes the yarn I may receive as gifts to try from other brands. I want to be very picky with this year because that yarn also comes with responsibility, and not everything that I've accepted has been appreciated to its fullest, I think, by me. And what I mean by that is I haven't necessarily enjoyed working with it, but I still promoted it in the sense that I shared with you what I had received. And I know that's not going to work out every single time, but just being more intentional, more responsible of what I accept, and also taking into account what I can manage as just one person with two hands knitting. By the end of last year, I had some yarn that I hadn't even touched that was gifted to me, and I don't like that. Although I am prioritizing those projects for the start of this year. Yeah, to simply put, that yarn comes with responsibility, and I want to not take that for granted. And I, again, want to just be very intentional with any yarn purchase or gift that I receive. So the second intention or resolution that I want to set for 2022 is to prioritize projects with smaller needles. When I first was knitting, I wasn't very shy to small needles. I was working up a lot of kits with 5mm needles, 4mm needles at times. Like this one, for example, this project was a very early project for me, and I think it was on 5mm needles. So a lot of my beginner projects actually were with smaller needles, but I think at some point I made that transition because I wanted to really quickly hone my skills as a knitter. Chunkier projects just allowed for really fast progress in that area. And then also, as a new beginner level designer, chunkier projects were just more suited to my level. While I think it was great for me at the time, I think I'm ready to graduate, so to speak, and move on to those smaller needle projects, not just, well, of course as a knitter, but as a designer too. If I'm being honest, I feel like the reason that I kept going with chunkier needles, aside from me wanting to hone my skills, I think why once I got those skills and then just continued on with chunkier needles has to do with the fact I was almost addicted to that progress. And I think I was even, I was just in that cycle of wanting to create content very quickly. While it might take a little bit more time, smaller needle projects will certainly mean a longer whip. This can also help me remain a little bit more intentional in what I choose to knit. The time, if I'm going to be extending the time that I work on a piece, I think I'm going to be more likely to choose things that I will get a lot of wear out of. I'll just be more intentional all around. I'll enjoy the process a lot more because I will be forced to slow down. I really want to embrace that slowness of knitting and really bring it to a meditative place and really go against the cycle that I'm currently in where I feel a lot of pressure just to produce. That's not what knitting's about. I really just want to reel myself in and work on things that might take a little bit more time because they might take a little bit more time, and just enjoy that process and really embrace it. The next intention that I've set for 2022 is to keep records of my knitting projects. Last year was definitely a really long year, and that made it kind of difficult to keep track of what I worked on. I mean, in my 2021 knits roundup, there were some things that I left out, I think, because I just simply forgot that they existed. Because I was so far removed from the beginning of the year or the middle of the year, there were parts where, you know, it's just a blur. Maybe that is moving from one project to the next and not fully appreciating it, but it's also due to the fact that I didn't really keep much of a record of those projects. I foresee myself knitting a lot less this year in comparison to last year, but what I really want is to be able to document it way better than I did the previous year. And I don't mean on social media. I used to use Instagram as this online journal, which I think a lot of us do. We post basically everything that we create, and that kind of serves as a making journal for all of us. But I'm starting to feel less and less inclined to post over on that platform. And instead of feeling forced to do so, I want to just keep the records to myself. And it's not just the pictures that I'm really concerned about. Well, I think that's really great. What I want to get better at is taking notes while I'm working, especially when I'm working on designs for myself. With these records, I'm going to keep track of the normal stuff like the gauge, the final measurements, what yarn did I use, but then I also really want to focus on the notes during and after the project. What worked well? What did I abandon? So I've set up a little notebook for myself to keep track of all things Well Loved Knits related. So it is going to be, my works in progress. It's going to be, schedules for designs and things, but then it's also going to be video content that I create, little ideas that I have, maybe a schedule as well. So here is the tentative layout that I'm starting to work with right now. Of course, this is subject to change because that's the beauty about bullet journaling. I will be doing bullet journaling and I'm sharing this with you, but I have no way think that I am an expert at bullet journaling and my penmanship is pretty bad. This isn't something that I'm trying to show off because I think it's a nice looking bullet journal. It's just because I want to share with you what I'm going to be keeping track of. So on the right hand side, this is kind of like my beginning notes. And then on the left hand side, this is more focused on after the piece is knit. On this left-hand side, I have a space, so I'll put a title up here, what the project is going to be called. And then, at the very start, jotting down the yarn that I'm using. That includes the color, the brand, the fiber content. Then I'll talk about gauge, the needle size that I use, and what size I'm intending on knitting up for the piece. Of course, I want to keep track of when I started it and when I finished it. Before I get started, I want to include a quick project description. This would be just the idea that I had behind the piece, what I think it's going to look like. And then over here, I will talk about things afterwards, the final measurements of the garment, what my outcome is. Did it work? Did it not work? What did, what didn't? If I have any changes, I'll list them. And then last thoughts, these are just, whatever I have left over, what else I want to really say. This could be something specific about the yarn or the design, whatever it might be. Maybe if I have other ideas that come out of this work in progress, that sort of thing. So this is, again, subject to change, but I think that's the beauty of having a clean notebook like this. You can kind of adapt it as you keep working. So I'll do a couple of projects with this layout and then see, how it works out. I'm also going to keep track of my yarn inventory through this little journal, which I think will be kind of interesting to see. And I hope that will help me with my other knitting resolution so that I manage to work through it and, really keep track of what still needs to be used and worked up. So the next one on the list is to try and finish a whip with a new technique. Now, duh. I feel like this is kind of course I would have this on the list. I want to continue to learn as a knitter and grow. And there are some things that I have not successfully done that I would like to finish. Try again and finish. I don't think it's just going to be one whip. I think there are going to be multiple whips this year that are going to include new techniques. The techniques that I have in mind specifically would be continental knitting, color work, brioche, maybe mosaic knitting instead of color work. I don't know. We'll see. Those are just some options that I have. I don't have all of the projects planned out necessarily, but there is at least one that I have my eye on. Something that I think would be a good way to introduce color work is to try again with the socks. There's a sock pattern, I think, with a houndstooth color work. And I think that would be really interesting for me to take on. So I'm not committing to it yet, and I'm not saying that I'm going to cast it on in the near future, but I do have that one pattern in mind, so I think color work might be the first one that I go for. This one's on the list because we should just never stop learning as knitters. I think, continuing to challenge myself, while I really like basic patterns and basic looks on clothing items, I think I would benefit from welcoming some new techniques, new stitches into my whip lineup. Okay, so the last one on the list, this is pretty short, but the last one on the list is to knit for others. and I am a self-proclaimed selfish knitter. I think that is still true, even though I did dabble in some gift knits at the end of last year. But I have to tell you, I had way too much fun knitting those gifts for Christmas. I think it brought a whole new dynamic to knitting for me that I just was not expecting it to. Because you're knitting for somebody else, you're thinking, okay, what project would they really appreciate the final piece of? I think that challenges you to work up things that you might not have done in the first place, because I wouldn't necessarily want it. They're not for me, so that doesn't mean that I would necessarily want it. But then also the excitement of it all coming together and then the anticipation to give it to them. I really enjoyed that from Christmas this past holiday. So I'm going to give gifts to all of my family members in 2022. That's definitely something that I want to do. I have socks that I need to knit up, hats. I think they're going to be smaller projects, to be honest, so that I can, maintain the rest of the things that I want to create. Usually I have strayed away from gifts because of the pressure that is kind of added on to my making. I will overlook some of those small blemishes because it's just part of the process for me. And I kind of like it when my final pieces have that little something off. It kind of makes it unique. I like that homemade look. But I feel like for a gift, it just shouldn't have those kind of imperfections that some of the things that I just let pass. So there's always been that little added pressure. If I'm gonna knit something as a gift, is it going to be up to quality standards? Then also project-wise, what I really want to make in 2022 is a men's sweater. So this is going to be a gift for my husband, obviously, and I've wanted to knit him a sweater for a long time. But again, I didn't feel like my skills were up to par, and I want it to be something that he wears. So I've always hesitated because I know that it's going to be a much bigger size. It's probably going to be on smaller needles because he wouldn't really want to wear a chunkier knit. So it's going to take a lot of my time, so I want to make sure that if I'm going to put all of that time and effort into something, it needs to be perfect so that he wears it. Now I can't decide if this is something that I'm going to make on my own with my own design, or if I'm going to follow a pattern, but that's just something that I'm kind of mulling over. I think for the next month or two, I'll give it some consideration, get some of the other projects that I want to have done off my needles, and then I can really put my head into that men's sweater mindset. But yeah, those are the knitting resolutions that I have for 2022. It's short, but I think that's really important for me to make sure that this is still attainable. I don't want to set really lofty goals that I can't actually achieve and then just get discouraged. So these are things that I know that are possible. I can do them. And now all I have to do is hold on to them for the rest of the year. And I think I'm really happy that I made this video because I want to hold myself accountable here. And I also wanted to share that with you because I feel like it's inspiring to hear what other people have on their knitting resolutions. And if we all work together, I'm sure we can achieve them. So I would really love to know what you guys are resolving to do knitting-wise this year. If you set any intentions for yourself for 2022, definitely let me know in the comments below. I would love to read them and encourage you all. And I hope in turn you will encourage me. So thank you guys so much for watching and chatting with me. I hope you enjoyed this video and hearing a little bit about what I see for this year for Well Loved Knits. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe to stick around if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye! I am so sorry if my voice sounds very strange. It does sound very strange. I've been holding on to a little bit of a cold. I don't feel sick, but my voice is just so weird right now. I'm really sorry about that.